Welcome to my home/editing den while I'm on these long photography road trips. So normally on rainy days, as you can see it is right now, I'll find a good place to park on a forest road or somewhere out in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. And I will make a French press coffee right there, grab a big bottle of water, and load up a bunch of my latest photos and work on them. So we can do that right now. I'll show you guys the pictures I was just taking and we'll work through some of the editing process. My name is Dave Morrow. 9 months of each year, I live out of my vehicle. I travel the wilderness by foot on an endless backpacking and landscape photography trip. I want to teach and share the photography and outdoor skills that I use on these trips. I don't want to spend hours editing video or sitting in front of a computer, so I made some rules. First, everything's shot on GoPro. This was the best way I found to record quickly on a consistent basis. Second, I can only spend 20 minutes editing each video. So thanks for watching, and welcome to the Landscape Photography Journals. Welcome back everyone, it's good to have you here. In this week's video, we're going to go through the 3 shots that I captured in last week's shooting video. This being the first, and these are all still raw files right now. This being the second, and this being the third. And I'm going to show you how I utilize histograms, being specifically the luminosity or lightness histogram and the RGB color channel histograms within Photoshop. But before I do that, I want to give you guys a sneak preview of the coming video for next week. So I just got back from a 5-day snowshoe/photography/backpacking trip out into the mountains. Here's our camp, and here's the shot which is featured in next week's video. So I'll give you guys a little sneak preview here right now. I hold down the white balance, or Kelvin, and I just look at the back of my screen and I try to match it to what I see out here with my eyes. So as you could see from that short clip of next week's video, I will be going through my entire live view shooting workflow. So I'm going to discuss next week why I use live view and the different functionalities within live view that make it one of the most important tools for a landscape photographer to use. I'll also discuss how I use live view to select the correct color balance or white balance for any scene. I use K or Kelvin mode, and I'll show you how to dial that in so you always have perfect color within your scene. And this will allow you to do much less post-processing back at home. It'll also give you much better or more accurate histogram readings on the back of your camera. If you want to make sure to catch that, click under the subscribe button right under this video. And once you click subscribe, you will see a little bell next to the subscribe button. If you're a current subscriber, you will already see this as well. If you click that little bell, every time I upload a new video on Tuesdays, it will notify you up in the top right-hand corner of your screen. Alright, so enough of that talk. Let's get to this week's video. So I was out in the deserts of California taking some shots last week and talking all about histogram. So for those of you that have not yet watched last week's video, you're going to need it to understand this week's video. So you can click in the top right hand corner of the screen, or you can click the link below this video and find last week's video. So I'm just going to load this photo up in Photoshop as a raw file. Alright, so now that I have this loaded up, I'm going to first discuss the few specific histograms which I use within Adobe Photoshop. Now histograms out in the field are much different than histograms back on your computer. They work in the same manner, but you're using them for different reasons. So out in the field we were just exposing to the right and using the histogram to make sure we didn't blow out any highlight detail, and also to make sure that we retained all the detail down in the darks of the picture. On the computer, you're using the histogram to make sure that you are moving the specific tonal values or ranges of light in the image into the correct places so it looks natural to your eye, matching what you saw out in the field. So the histogram on the computer is a calibration device. It allows you to look at the histogram, look at the picture, and then know if the colors and light values that you're seeing on the picture match what you actually saw in the field. So it's allowing you to calibrate what your eyes see out in the field to what you see on the screen and make sure that all matches and meshes for a nice natural looking photo. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over the luminosity histogram. And I'm going to go over these fairly quickly. I'm not going to go into extreme technical or scientific detail on this. If you'd like to learn the science behind how these work and go into extreme technical detail, I will add some different hyperlinks below this video and down in the description, which provide links to my website. If you want to be a very competent and high-level photographer, you really need to know the scientific background of how this stuff works, because that's the only way you can actually visualize how it works in your head and really understand how color and light works within a scene. So the luminosity histogram. This is the first histogram that I use. This is the histogram that I use 95% of the time I'm editing photos. So luminosity can also be called lightness. You may have heard of luminosity masks or luminosity channels within Photoshop. Luminosity just looks at each pixel within the image and rates it on a scale of black to white. So what it essentially does, I will sample a pixel here with my eyedropper tool. If I just click anywhere on the screen, it will sample the color of that pixel. And for anybody that's not quite aware of how pixels work, every pixel is just a small cube which makes up the photo as a whole. Each of these pixels is just a single specific color, no more. So if I click on a pixel, say up here or right here, you can see it changes the color right here. So let's click a pixel right here. This pixel I just clicked has a color which matches right here. You'll notice over here on the right hand side I have this L value. That is lightness. So L value of 50 here. Lightness or luminosity just rates every pixel on the scale of black to white. So this is simply saying that this pixel is perceived by our eyes to be 50% as bright as pure white. So it would stack up on the histogram in the 50th percentile. Black, white, 50% gray in the direct center. So let's say I moved this little color picker, whatever color I'm sampling will show right here, down to black. You can see that the lightness value is now 0. So if I had pure black in my image, it would stack up on the very left hand side here on the luminosity histogram. Watch as I move this color up towards white. These luminosity values or lightness values will increase until they get to be 100% at pure white. Now if I go to a very light color, let's say yellow, this is simply saying that this color of yellow, which I've selected right here and which shows right here, is 99% as bright as pure white. So it would show up on the very right hand portion of the luminosity histogram. Not quite to the very right though. So all this is doing, this histogram looks at every pixel in the whole image and it says, compared to pure white, how bright is that pixel? So let's sample this pixel right here. If I pull it up with the color picker tool, this pixel that I just selected is 77% as bright as pure white. So you can remember 0%, 100%, and then it just goes from 1% all the way to 99% in between. So if I just eye this and take an educated guess, 77% would be right in this region. So let's try to guess what these specific spikes within our luminosity histogram correlate to on this picture. So when we're looking at this, you're going from 0% to 100%, black to white. The height of this actual histogram just denotes how many pixels lie within that tonal range. So if I go right here to this large spike, that's probably covering the range of maybe, and I'm just guessing here, 30 to 50% as bright as pure white. So 30% starting right here and ending at 50% right here. Now if I pull up my color picker again, and I'll just place this down here so you can watch it. If I hover around down here, the lightness values will probably change in this region from about 30 to 50%. See how they're staying in that range? There's the 40s, and then if I come up here, see how this is lighter than this? If I click around there. And if I click over here, these are about 50. So I would say that this large spike right here correlates to this large area of sand dunes down here, which is ranging between approximately 30% as bright as pure white to 45 or 50% as bright as pure white. And then it drops back down here. So you could also take a guess at what this spike might be. So if we go into this scene here, we could just take a guess that this is probably, I don't know, 65 to 70% as bright as pure white. So maybe 60% to 75% as bright as pure white range right there. We could just go up into the clouds. You can see that that cloud is approximately 72. So I would say that these large chunk of clouds right here, including some of this up here, is that spike we're seeing right there. Remember, the height is just the number of pixels in those tonal values. And the horizontal axis just denotes where they are in the range of black to white when comparing to pure white at the right-hand side. So we could sample one more here. Let's sample up here. We can see the lightness value here is 92% as bright as pure white. So that's probably showing somewhere in this range right here. If we look at the very right-hand side here, we can see that no pixels lie in the very brightest portions of the tonal range for this specific image. The same goes for the darker portions right here. So we could correlate this spike right here, which ranges from maybe 15 to 25% as bright as pure white, to these mountains here. See how their lightness values are always probably between 15 and 25%. Now the reason that I can look at this and guess these so easily is because I've trained my eye to do so. I do experiments like this mentally all the time. I'll look at the picture and I'll pull up my color sampler and I'll look at the color and see how bright that color is compared to pure white. So like I said before, if you want to understand more of this, I will link a bunch of different topics below which you can read up on it. It's not just going to click in your head right away. It's something that's very complex to understand at first, but if you want to become a master photographer or master post-processor, it's really going to help you on your pathway to get there. So the next thing we need to discuss is the 3 color channels, red, green, and blue. I use these about 5% of the time when editing photos. These red, green, and blue channels are known as the 3 primary colors. They combine together to give you the Rgb histogram. I find the specific channels and their histograms by themselves to be much more effective in determining color and light within the image. So to do this, or to teach this, I'm going to pull up a blank white document. I will go to 8-bit RGB color. And you don't have to do this. I'm just going to show you here on the screen. So I'm going to explain how color and light works within a photo. Now this is something you'll probably have to watch 10 times if you have not seen it before, because it takes a little bit of time to understand. So we have the color picker again. So let's first talk about the color red. The color red can be found at a hue of 0 degrees. So hues can be found here ranging from 0 all the way to 360 degrees. And that's the same as your color wheel here, but the hues are found around the outside in 360 degrees. Pure red hue can be found here at 0 degrees at a brightness and saturation of 100. So that's just pure red. So red ranges from red being turned off, so-called, at the far left, or black, to red being turned on 100% over here at the far right. And then you have 256 small steps or increases of red from off to pure red. So you can just look right here. If you look at the RGB here, you'll notice that green and blue are turned off at 0. So is red. That's why I'm seeing pure black right here. As I increase from black towards pure red, you'll notice that red is stepping up in increments right here. Green and blue are doing nothing because I'm only working with pure red right now. So 0 to 255 is 256 different steps of red. So if I took this color of red right here and I just colored on my screen, remember that red's value was 255. So you'll notice right here, it gives a spike at 255. So that's just showing where red exists from off being black to on being pure red. So let's do a test here. If I grab a red in these middle values, so 128 is approximately half of 255. So I'll grab this color of red. If I just color it the whole way over this, this histogram is going to move into the center. See how it is now moved halfway into the center, representing that new color of red, which I just colored on the screen. So 127. So 0, 255, about half of that is 127. You could move it down once again to a lower value and color it on the screen. And once again, the histogram would shift and move to that lower value. So all these red, green, and blue histograms are just showing you how much the color is turned on or off within each pixel. So this same game would work for the other color channels as well. So let's say we have green. Now pure green is found at a hue of 120 degrees, brightness and saturation, S and B, at 100%. So you'll see that red is now turned off, green is now turned on, blue is now turned off. If I wanted to get closer to green being turned off, I could go down on this axis. You'll see that the numbers next to green are dropping. If I click here and color this whole thing green, it will place a spike in my histogram right in this region. And you can see that spike right there. So what the RGB histogram does is it combines all these different color channels and it will show them on the screen. I don't find this RGB histogram to be that helpful, and I'll show you why. So let's look at this. RGB, you have now a spike on the left-hand side, and then you have a spike right here. Why do you think that exists? Well, first we have green at 93 at a 255. That's showing up right here. But we also have red turned off and blue turned off. And that's why this spike is higher, representing two of the color channels at the far left. So what's confusing about it is that even though we see no red or blue on the screen, the RGB histogram still shows us a spike over here at the left-hand side. So let's pick some weird colors that are mixtures of red, green, and blue. So I can just go somewhere in here. So now we have a color which has R98, green 204, blue 128. If I click OK and color this on the screen, you'll see the RGB histogram change once again. So now let's look at this and see if we can correlate these to this. And it's very easy with just one color. We have green 204, so that would be this spike. We have blue 128, so that would be this spike. And then we have red 98, which is this spike. So it's just rating the colors from 0 being off to 255 being on. So we could pick another color somewhere over in here, and we can also color this on the screen. Now you'll see that these become much harder to decipher because we have two different colors on the screen, each with three specific primary colors combined to create them. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spikes. Now one of these spikes is overlapping because technically we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because they are two colors with three primary colors to create them. So one of these is just overlapping over itself. So we could look at this and try to pick out which is which. We could first sample this color, and we can see that that color is 128, 204, 98. So 204 is probably that large spike right there. Then we have 128, which might be one of these spikes. It's probably the center spike right here. And then 98, which is probably this spike right here. If we now sample over here, we have 124, 129, and 143. I would say that this is the 143. And remember, we had 128 in the other photo, or the other color, I should say. So these are just overlapping right here. So you can see that using the RGB histogram, it's going to be very hard to get information about each pixel because it's going to break them up into the three color channels. So there's also one more thing I want to show you guys. The RGB color space is known as an additive color space. So if I have 0, meaning red is off, 0 meaning green is off, and 0 meaning blue is off, creates pure black. That would be shown at the far left on the RGB color channel. If I turn all of these on, say 255 blue, 255 green, and 255 red, it creates pure white. So when you add the three primaries together at 100%, they create pure white, and that's found at the far right-hand side here. Now let's say I'm looking at this hue strip right here. If I combined red and green, which are two primary colors, it would give me the secondary color of yellow. So if I combined red at 100% or 255 and green at 100% at 255, that means that blue would have to be off, and it would give me pure yellow. That's easy because it's found right between red and green. The same goes for mixing the primary color green and blue. If I turn red off and I turn blue on, it gives me cyan, which is found between pure blue and pure green. And the last holds true for mixing pure blue with pure red. So if I turn this on and then I turn green off, it's going to give me magenta, which is the third secondary color. So you have your primaries, red, green, and blue, and your secondaries, magenta, cyan, and yellow. And they can all be created from mixing these together. Now you can also mix other colors together at different rates, whatever you deem fit, by selecting any color here, and then moving it from values of 0 saturation, which can be found on the left-hand side, to 100% saturation, found on the right-hand side. So you'll see this HSB. This is the saturation values. They range from 0 being grayscale. So if something is not saturated at all, it'll be on this tonal value scale of black to white. And then you can move right, and as I do so, these values will increase until you get over to pure hue. So a hue is just a fully saturated color. Then you also have the brightness scale, ranging from black to full brightness. So if you are at 0 saturation, brightness ranges from black to white. If you are at any other rate of saturation throughout your image, brightness ranges from black to full brightness for that specific color. So you can just see how all these colors move around in the 3D color space. And I have a really in-depth tutorial on color theory and color spaces, which I will link below this video so you can read up on that. So now let's look at this picture, and I'm going to show you how I use the RGB color histogram when edited in RAW. So at the top of Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw, which I'm in right now, you have this histogram. So this is the RGB histogram. This gray area, that's actually showing the RGB histogram. Then you can also see your basic color channels. You can see blue and green, and where blue and green mix, it shows you cyan. You can see red and green, where they mix, gives you yellow. And then you can see where any other overlaps are and their primary and secondary colors that they create. So I don't really look at this too much. I really want to make sure that I'm not losing any blacks off the left-hand side or any whites off the right-hand side. So remember when we were out in the field shooting this in last week's video, I exposed to the right in the field, pushing the histogram all the way over to the right-hand side without touching the edge. So first I'm just going to back the exposure back down to make the image brightness match what I saw out there in the field. After I do that, I can slightly adjust the temperature and tint if necessary. I'm going to add a little bit more blue to this since it's a little bit too warm compared to what I saw while out shooting. And then I can add a little bit of magenta as well. And this is just the initial edit. I can always bounce back and forth if I need to. So next I can just add a little bit of contrast. And then I'm going to take the highlights and the whites and I'm going to pull them down to the left. And that'll help me to retain some of this nice color up here in the sky and clouds. So what I did here is I shifted the histogram, which was pushed way over to the right hand side, back to the tonal values which I actually saw while out in the field. And unfortunately you don't have a luminosity histogram here in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom because you're still editing a raw file. So next I can come to this tone curve and I'll just add a little bit of contrast back into this scene, maybe something like that. When I'm adding lights here, I really want to watch the brightest portions of this scene, such as up here, and make sure I'm not going overboard and losing some of that nice vivid color. So I normally go a little bit under what I actually would in the final scene, and then I can add touches of light such as up here and down in the dunes once I get into Photoshop. So maybe something like that, And then I'll pull down the darks, add a little bit of contrast there. And I would rather go too dark here than too bright, as long as I'm not losing dark detail off the left-hand side. So at this point I can hit Open Object, and this is just a quick edit. If I was actually going to fully edit this photo, I would take much longer to do so. I just want to show you why I use those specifics. So here in Photoshop, I have the edited raw file. I use Smart Objects so I could always double click this and jump back into RAW at any time. And that gives me a much more malleable and higher image quality in the final photo. So essentially what I'm doing with the RGB histogram in RAW is making sure it sits in a range which represents tonal values, which I actually saw out in the field. If I was shooting sunset, which is fairly dark for most parts of the image, and my histogram was way over here, I would know something was off. So I'm just trying to get it in the range of what I actually saw while out there shooting. So something right in there. Now for editing, I normally go to the Luminosity Histogram. I just like that it rates colors on the scale of black to white, so I can see where everything lies within the entire tonal range. So for this image, I'm going to show you how I just do a few slight edits. I'm going to come down here to this Smart Object, and I'm going to make a duplicate copy of it by going to Layer, Smart Objects, New Smart Object via Copy. And I have that as Command O as my shortcut, which I usually use. So that just makes a duplicate copy of this exact same file right here. If I double click this, it opens back up into Camera Raw. So I'm going to use this duplicate copy to add some slight touches of light down here, and maybe a few up in the clouds and some of these dunes back here. So first I'll just take care of these dunes. I'm going to darken the exposure, and when I do so, I'm going to pull up the whites. And I'm only watching these dunes and the portions of them which I'd like to adjust. I don't care about the rest of the scene, because I will take care of that with a layer mask. So maybe something like that. I don't want to go too bright and make it look unnatural. So something right in there. Now I can always go a little bit higher here because I can brush these adjustments in at a lower opacity with Photoshop. So I'll hit OK. And you'll see how that really added some contrast down here. So I can hold down the Alt button and I can click on this layer mask. It will make a black layer mask. I can go to the brush tool right here and select a white brush if I don't already have one. So now I can go up to opacity and I'll adjust it down to maybe a 50% opacity. And I can slowly mask this in. So I'm looking where the light source is. The sun was coming in the side here and hitting this scene. So I'm just going to add touches of light that start where that light source is. So maybe right here, just coming into the scene. Something like that. And now I can even go with a lower opacity, say 20, and do some touches of light right up here. I just don't want to go overboard and lose those colors. So while I'm watching luminosity, I'm just looking at all different parts of my scene and making sure that they match up with what I actually saw while shooting. So I could do some more touches of light down here. And if I ever want to see the underlying adjustment here, I can hold down Shift and click on my layer mask. That will let me see what happened here without the overlying layer mask. So I might brush a little bit more right here. So now if I ever want to sample the different luminosity values here, I can just pull up a blank layer and I can grab the eyedropper tool. And all I'm doing is I'm sampling on this color and I pull it up so it says L64, meaning this color is 64% as bright as pure white approximately. And I can think about the scene while I was out shooting and say, yeah, that makes sense in my brain. This color up here in the sky was very vivid and colorful, but it was not that bright. So I could go over here to these clouds, which are slightly brighter. Those are about 70% as bright as pure white. And I can say to my brain, yeah, did that make sense? I mean, I have nothing pure white in the scene. So that would make sense if they were about 70% as bright as pure white. If they were too dark or too light, I could always make adjustments using things such as curves and levels to change where they lie within the tonal range. Alright, that is all I got for you guys today as far as learning stuff goes.
Hopefully you guys can utilize those tools of adjusting and processing color and light in different ways in your photos and being able to analyze it using the Rgb histogram as well as the Luminosity histogram. And I use that in different ways as well. In the following post-processing videos, which I will post as part of this series, we'll dive more and more in depth into those topics so you can get a broader understanding of how they work. But for now, I wanted to give you guys a quick heads up that I just posted 120 new images over to my portfolio from my last 6 months of travel. And I feel that these are my best photos to date. Over the last 6 months to a year of my life, I've really worked hard at learning more about color and light. And I'm trying to get my pictures to look more and more natural, or more and more of what I saw out in nature with my eyes. Photography is all about getting better on a consistent basis and learning new things. That's what makes it really fun for me. And I don't ever feel satisfied or accomplished with my latest images, even after they're completely done. But I feel that if I work hard at them on a consistent basis over my lifetime, by the end of my life, I'll have a bunch of good pictures that I really like and that I really enjoy. And even if I don't like them by that point, I'll have a lot of good memories of all the travel and trips that I went on, the people that I met, and the places that I explored. So if you guys want to check those out, here's the link up here, and I also leave it below the video. So thanks again for letting me teach you guys today. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoy discussing all these technical aspects of photography. I will be back next week shooting this shot right here and teaching you guys about the live view settings, which I use in the field, and how to dial in the correct color temperature for your shots while it's shooting. So thanks again for watching, guys. I will see you next week on Tuesday. Bye.